Damn, son, where'd you find this?
People don't be offended by the truth. They be offended because you called out the truth. Simple as that. They don't want to hear any other narrative that makes them look bad.
One thing I can't stand at this big grown age is somebody who act like cause and effect does not exist. Like, yes, your actions caused this outcome. Yes, what you did lit the match. Like, why are you surprised and playing victim?
Guys, Chico, they never lied.
That's how you know somebody doesn't respect you. They listen to reply, not to be understood. They cut you off. They minimize what actually matters to you. They laugh at your boundaries, and then they call you sensitive when you try to hold the line. They show up late. They cancel last minute, forget the things you've told them, because in their world, your time, your energy, even your voice aren't a priority. They're just an option. You see, there are two kinds of people. Those who adjust when they realize they've actually hurt you, and those who expect you to adjust so they don't have to change. You don't need to be disrespected loudly to be disrespected deeply. Sometimes you'll see it. It's just in their tone, in their patterns, in the silence after you're known. Respect isn't what they say when they're watching. It's how they act when they think you'll tolerate it.
By examining his own attitude towards the possibilities of peace, towards the Soviet Union, towards the course of the Cold War.
Our muscle. It was a way of making me feel that they were a part of me.
You see it on the bridge. Wait, how they get it? If the government had to change the screw in the bridge, they had to shut it down. They got state troopers out there. They got lanes closed. They got their strange machines. How did they get up there?
Happy Hump Day, people. Peace and blessings to you all. I hope you are good. I hope your week is going well. And I extend my humble thanks for your attendance this evening. Oh, this is going to be an interesting show tonight. I'm going to bring Sydney up here in a second. I just want to give my shout outs to my poets, writers, and well, let's say this. There are some things that are coming, and we're looking like the assembly is finally getting its pieces together. You'll see real soon what I'm referring to. Big shout outs to the people. Yeah. Saturday, 8:00. 8:00. The Attic Open Mic returns. Yeah, the spoken word is back. I'm excited for that. But that's neither here nor there. Tonight, I give the mic over to my co-host, the star of the hour. Make sure you show love. Matter of fact, let me bring this up here while I'm at it so I don't forget. If you want to follow her, is it on here? They're weird. They're really weird. I was going to put the QR code up. It's not on this one for some reason. That's fine. Let me go ahead and bring her up. Sid, good evening. How are you?
My bad. Good thing I didn't do it the whole stream teaching you about the ozone layer, and by the end, like, oh, you didn't hear anything? Cool. Doing pretty good. How are you doing?
I'm good. I don't know if you saw it. I know you saw it, but if you didn't see it, I can't even pronounce that woman's name. But she went on and said she is going, not going, she signed off on a petition for the release of the Epstein files.
Oh, Adelita. Yes,
Yes,
I did see that. Hopefully, that will pass a certain person's desk because I'm fairly certain he also has to sign off on it. So we'll see what happens with that. But I am so happy that they finally have those votes because that needed to come out yesterday. It needed to come out in January.
seriously. But look, I'm here to learn. I'm here to
What's happening?
I don't know. Let me try that again. There we go. All right, we back. There's been a lot of before I turn it over. For the last 2 days, there's been a lot of little weird stuff with the audio stuff. First, it was me trying to figure out why we couldn't, and then I was in the middle of having a meeting. You'll get to meet soon. And the same thing happened again. The only difference was it was my link. The link that I was using, it was old. So it was on my end. My mic wasn't acting right. I don't know why it don't do that. I spent the whole day sitting here recording. Then out of nowhere, it just had all these little issues, but we got it straight and we're here. So enough of that. I'm gonna turn the mic over to you. I will be here. I will definitely be doing my ones and twos. The floor is yours. I think that's it. Let me give.
I gotta show this off too. I just got it. I'm super excited. It's made of helenite, which is the type of stone made at the Mount St. Helens volcano in Washington.
That's dope.
Right?
Yeah. Feel like you got some kind of powers now.
The Great Lake ring.
Right.
Power of the skies.
Mm-hmm. All right, I'm gonna let you do your thing. I'll be right here if you need me.
Okay. Feel free to comment too. Hi, Chef. Welcome. So today, I'm going to be covering the difference between ozone greenhouse gases. I know, and my daughter's right here too. I know in the past that I've talked a lot about climate change, greenhouse gases, but I realized recently that I haven't covered. Thank you for the book. I realized I haven't actually talked about the ozone layer, which is a different part of the atmosphere. It has different types of gases. And I also think it's a really important thing to talk about because not only does it do different things for the planet, and I mean, to really understand our impacts on the planet, we have to understand how it works in full. But also, it's a perfect example of how working together can actually solve climate issues. I'll get into it in a little bit, but a tiny synopsis. Back in the 80s, there was a hole that formed. It took place longer than just the 80s, but it was the 80s when we realized that there was a massive hole forming in the ozone layer. And we nationally, internationally got together and banned a lot of the substances that caused it. And at this point, it has healed. There is no hole in the ozone layer. And so I thought it would be a really important topic to cover because, as I said, each layer in our atmosphere plays a really important role for the Earth, but also it's motivating to know that we can actually make a difference, especially with how stressful, daunting, overwhelming the whole idea of trying to fix the planet can seem. So first, I figured I'd kind of go over the atmosphere itself, because the atmosphere is not just air. It's not just like a whole bunch of air on top of our planet. There's a whole hierarchy of gases. This is based on the density of the gases, as well as relationships with the with gravity and outer space. Let me just pull up my map so I give you the right layering. Okay, so the closest atmosphere, the closest layer to us, the one that we breathe, is the troposphere. That is the planes, the airliners that are flying in the stratosphere, which is why if you fall out of an airplane, you won't be able to breathe. That's why things like Mount Everest, you can't really breathe, because they're too high up there for us to have breathable oxygen. So the bottom sliver is really the breathable oxygen that humans and other animals need to breathe. Airplanes reach the peak of the troposphere. They don't go into the stratosphere. Things like weather balloons and some forms of not satellites, but some forms of like monitoring equipment are in the stratosphere. But as you go up into the atmosphere, the density of the air gets thinner and thinner. Once you get into the exosphere, that's where spaceships or satellites are. There's basically no gravity there. And let me pull up. Just want to pull up the actual information about the layers so I give you the correct information, because there's a lot to remember with those particular ones. Okay. There we go. So starting with the troposphere, this is where all the weather happens. What you can actually see with like larger storms, they actually get stopped by the stratosphere. So that's why they have like that flat top sometimes. And this layer, man, I want to find the makeup, because the each of the layers are made up of different amounts of gases. And okay, there we go. The troposphere is primarily nitrogen and oxygen. Interestingly, even though we all know that we have to breathe oxygen to live, we can't actually have a full oxygen environment. If you have an oxygen environment that's higher than, I believe, 24%, things become very flammable. Like the air could actually catch on fire itself. There was a time in history when, long ago, before humans, where we had a lot more oxygen in the environment, in the lower atmosphere, to the point that we have massive wildfires, really extreme. It would be super flammable. Lightning would strike and the whole, like, the air would catch on fire. We also, as I said, we have 78% nitrogen, and there's also small amounts of argon, water vapor, and of course carbon dioxide, which is going to be a element to the discussion. And then once you get into the stratosphere, again, that's where you'll have weather balloons, and you're going to start having a decreased composition of the gases that we need to breathe. So we would not be able to survive on this type of air. It is partially important because it kind of holds in the water vapor. There is very little moisture in the stratosphere, and the stratosphere is where the ozone layer is. So I won't get too much into the other layers because they're not as important for the conversation. Because they don't really with the troposphere, that's where the greenhouse gases are. With the stratosphere, that's where the ozone layer is. So I won't go into detail about the other layers, but just for your information, above the stratosphere, we have the mesosphere. That's where temperatures are negative 15 degrees Celsius or 5 degrees Fahrenheit. So we would not enjoy being in the mesosphere. We also would not have enough oxygen to breathe there. This is actually the location that meteors break up. So when you see shooting stars or comets, not comets, comets are way out into space, but meteorites, when they come through the atmosphere, that is where they end up burning up. So when you see one, you're watching it you're seeing the mesosphere. And then beyond that is the thermosphere. That is what absorbs a lot of or starts to absorb a lot of the ultraviolet rays, the X-ray radiation from the sun. And the temperature there drops to negative 84 degrees, so quite cold. The upper layers going towards space can hit 3,600 degrees Fahrenheit. So again, not survivable. We don't want to be up there. That's why space shuttles have to be incredibly insulated to protect all of the people that are there. The thermosphere is also where you'll see aurora borealis. As I said, this is the layer where radiation starts to interact with our atmosphere, and that's what caused the aurora borealis, which, by the way, fun fact, we're actually going through a solar flare moment in the last couple days. So if you're in some of the more northern locations, you might actually be able to see an aurora. Some of the darker locations, even in California, have been seeing reddish tints. So if you're farther north, like say Great Lakes region, Washington, Oregon, Canada, Russia, if I have any European viewers, Norway, Sweden, stuff like that, you might get some luck and see some gorgeous skies. I've been seeing some on social media from people up in like Michigan and stuff like that. So look out for that. That's still going on today, and I think it's peaking today. So you might see some cool stuff if it's dark enough where you are. And lastly is the exosphere. That one is 6,200 miles above the Earth. And at this point, it's freezing cold. There isn't enough gases to hold in the heat. This is where satellites are orbiting, and it is basically the extent of our atmosphere. Beyond that, it's just space. So as I said, the ozone layer is up in the stratosphere and mesosphere. Let me double check. Stratosphere, yes. And the greenhouse gases tend to hang out in the troposphere. Both of them are incredibly important for our lives, for everything living on Earth. For greenhouse gases, as we probably know, are there as a blanket. The thicker the blanket, the warmer it's going to be. And that nice layer of carbon dioxide, which is a thick kind of air, it's heavier because of how it's made, prevents heat from escaping back out into space, which is the key reason why global warming exists. As you add more carbon to the atmosphere, you're adding more padding to the blanket. So instead of a thin blanket, you're going to have a thick quilt. And we're currently seeing that as we speak. The past couple hundred years, we've been contributing increasingly more and more stuffing into our environment, and that ends up warming the system because not as much heat is able to escape. On the other hand, ozone is both a layer and a gas. The ozone layer is approximately 6 to 30 miles above the Earth's surface, and it's made up of O3, which is the oxygen we breathe is O2. O3 is obviously 3 oxygen atoms rather than 2, but this one is highly reactive, and it does what do you call it? It is produced naturally in the environment, but it also is man-made. A lot of the products that we use and have used in the past contribute to the ozone in the atmosphere, which I'll get to. But the reason why the ozone layer is so important is because it reduces the amount of harmful radiation that reaches the Earth's surface. And without it, if we were to suddenly lose our ozone layer, we would basically be nuclear roasted by the sun. It wouldn't be the heat, it would be the radiation itself coming from the sun that would cook us. And again, this is different than greenhouse gases because it is absorbing the solar energy, not the radiative energy. So even though they do both play a role in protecting us, because the blanket also holds in the air that we breathe, but they both do play slightly different roles. The ozone, as I said, can be produced by us as well. In the past, in the 80s or even before that, it was frequently found in styrofoam, in refrigerants, things that involved cooling, because it has, as I said, it's highly reactive, and so it really likes to absorb heat. And if you want to cool something down, you want to use something that helps absorb the heat. And so it was used in refrigerators, it was used in air conditioners and other types of cooling devices. It also could be released in other things like paints, like gas, chemical plants, even like print shops, stuff that are using specific chemicals to create art or whatever. You also can get them from like furnaces, boilers, motor vehicles. And as we release these chemicals into the environment, it basically starts to degrade. I think I misspoke. They're not releasing the O3, the chemical, the gasoline, stuff like that. But they are releasing chemicals that kill the ozone. But let me see. It is okay. So yeah, so there's the ozone in the sky. Again, we can produce it. It's produced by nature. But the things that were in the refrigerants, the things that were in the paints and stuff like that, cars, those are volatile organic compounds and nitrogen oxides, and the photochemical reaction. So basically, when exposed to the sun, when exposed to light, it'll form a chemical reaction that breaks up the ozone. And so as we were using these products, it was even found in hairspray. I think a lot of people kind of associate ozone with hairspray. We basically were starting to deplete the ozone layer. And they realized in the 80s, I believe it was 84, that over the summer, a hole was starting to form over Antarctica. And that is problematic, not only because Antarctica, as I've kind of talked about in other episodes, is very susceptible to heat, which radiation does cause heat. So it could increase the melting of the Antarctic region. But a hole in the ozone is not good because it's releasing radiation straight into the earth. And the fact that we were breaking down the ozone layer was letting us know that we're eating away at the protective shield that we require to survive. It's similar to sunscreen, like why we would wear sunscreen when we go outside. The ozone layer protects that radiative damage. As we all know, sunburns are caused by the radiation of the sun entering our skin, and it isn't necessarily the heat, it's actually the radiation, which is why sunscreen is also, sunburns are associated with skin cancer, because it literally destroys the DNA inside your skin. And so if we lost this ozone layer, we would all be more susceptible to cancers. A lot of plants would die because they wouldn't be able to survive the onslaught of the sun. Even though they need the sun, too much sun would kill them. And as I said, radiation affects the DNA itself. It can actually cause it to like unravel or break apart. And when you break apart DNA is the instruction manual for the body. It lets the body know how to replicate cells, what to do with the cells, what the cells are purposes are, how to how they should degrade and whatnot. Like it's the whole guide to the DNA. And if you damage that, you basically are going to give the wrong signals to your cells, which would allow it to either grow in a way that's damaging, or you can grow too many of them, which is what caused tumors. And this, again, anything that has cells, plants have cells, animals have cells. And without the ozone layer, things would not be able to survive. So once scientists realized that we were starting to do damage to the ozone layer, they very, very quickly, in relative terms, started to ban the chemicals that were found to cause the ozone layer. Hairspray was one of the major ones, deodorant cans, anything that used aerosols would have an impact on the release of chemicals that would kind of mess with the ozone layer. Let me see if I can. I think it took 10 years for them to fully heal. Let's see. It was closed in 2023. It was officially closed December 20th, 2023. The ozone was started to be noticed most significantly in the 70s, the late 70s. The official ban on ozone depleting substances, which include chlorofluorocarbons, which is why the refrigerants, the solvents, propellants, stuff like that, that's why those were banned, the stuff in air conditioners, fridges, cars. And then I don't know if anyone remembers halogen lamps. Those were also banned. That's why we don't have those types of light bulbs anymore, because they also were considered ozone depleting substances. it was in 1989 that they started to ban that. And then by the mid-90s, that's when ozone layers were starting to stabilize. And then the ozone layer itself began to recover in the 2000s. Interestingly, the chemical ozone can actually reach ground levels, especially with days of really severe air pollution, and it can cause a lot of issues on the ground. So we still technically kind of have an ozone issue. It's just more so related to sitting pollution rather than ozone in the sky. And so this, again, is a really good example of why or how we can actually make a difference. It took a ban to do so, but we did this together. We did this nationally. There was a movement, or internationally, there was a movement to remove these substances from the environment, find new ways to do the things that we normally did with machines, and find new ways to like refrigerate things, new ways to make hairspray and sprayable things. Like obviously we still have aerosol containers. It's just now using like pressurized air or other substances that aren't damaging to our atmosphere. Let me see. I found the chemical equation for how ozone is basically is affected by these chemicals. It basically, the chlorine atom will remove an oxygen atom from the ozone molecule to make it how do you pronounce that? Chlorooxidate. And so it basically transfers O2, or I mean O3 to O2. So it turns into chlorative oxygen. I forgot how to say it. To just regular oxygen. So that's how it ended up breaking down the oxygen or the ozone, because as it came into contact with these chemicals we were releasing into the air, it basically broke down the ozone chemical and turned it from ozone to regular oxygen. And so that's why it was depleting the ozone layer. I didn't explain it as well the first time. And let's see, it significantly decreased between 1980 and 1990. There's pretty cool charts that you can see on online showing the decrease of ozone, and you can see a very dramatic increase after they, or decrease after they enact the law. And so, as I said, it's a fantastic, motivating example of how we are able to make substantial impacts on the environment. We already see our impact the other way around of all of the things that we do negatively to the planet, but we don't have very many good examples of us making a positive difference. And I think that's part of the problem with climate change, is we don't have enough examples of positive change. And it's nice to see that there is at least a few examples of us being able to make a positive difference, especially with the current atmosphere of, no pun intended, that we're living through politically. I'm going to look at the comments because I see there's been quite a conversation in the chat. I just want to make sure that I answer any questions. Real spill, yes. Each layer does have a specific job to keep the planet from getting cooked. And some of the layers do hold electrical charges. It does depend on the type of, let me double check that. I know there is a difference because lightning can form in some of the atmospheric layers, but not others. Let's see. I know in there's different types. It's interesting because I could probably do a whole episode on it actually. But there's a bunch of different types of lightning based on the layer of Earth, a layer of the atmosphere that it's in. I forget. I at the moment I don't quite remember exactly which one's which, but I do know there's one cool one that they just discovered recently in the last like 10 years, where it's lightning that actually shoots upwards into space. I think they're called sprites, and they're pretty cool to see. But there are different forms of lightning depending on which location it's in. I know there's there's some called elf lightning, and that happens in the ionosphere. Most of the lightning that we see is in the stratosphere and the troposphere. And then I believe there's a different type in the mesosphere as well, but I don't quite remember that one at the moment. But yes, there is different types of lightning and electrical activity in the different layers of the Earth. And again, I'll do another episode on that because it is really interesting. There's a lot more to lightning than just it comes out of clouds. Let's see. And then, let's see. Microwave. Yeah, methane, Chef, methane is definitely not just from cows, even though it is a big contributor. Methane is quite a big issue as well, more so than carbon dioxide, partially because of how it gets released. It gets released in larger amounts with carbon dioxide, it's released from a lot of sources, but the problem with methane is it's released in very large amounts from melting permafrost, as well as released from like under the ground. Could also do another episode on that one too, because methane is quite problematic because it's like, I think it's either 360 times more potent or 3,000 times more potent than carbon dioxide, which is it's bad, obviously, because it's going to be able to hold in more of the heat. Luckily, it doesn't last as long in the atmosphere as carbon dioxide. I think carbon dioxide breaks down in like 70 to 100 years or something like that, or it could even be as long as 1,000 years. I'd have to double check that one. But methane, it is 28 times more potent than carbon dioxide, but it only lives less, or it only stays in the atmosphere about 6 to 10 years. So it doesn't last nearly as long. But when you release large amounts of it in the atmosphere all at once, that can be very problematic, especially when we're still dealing with the actual carbon issues, global warming issues. Let's see. I have heard they're proposing a solar shield. That is something that I've seen in the works. I know a lot of billionaires have been kind of working on that. Who knows if that'll actually happen? I've also heard of deployable shields to block out either gamma ray bursts or solar flare, EMP, or not EMPs. There's a name for them when they're like really severe. But I don't know how feasible it is. It sounds very sci-fi, but who knows? Like, we invent some pretty crazy things. So maybe we could eventually have our own shield. I do think that it could have its own possible impacts. I've always been a little bit wary of wanting to mess around with nature, because we definitely see how that could affect things. A side tangent, there was a man in the 1800s that was known as like the rainmaker, and he would use chemicals, like a mixture of chemicals. To this day, they still don't know what his formula was because he died without ever revealing it. But he used those to basically seed clouds, and he was pretty successful, actually. There was a number of cities that paid him because he would release his mixture into the sky, and they would end up with rainstorms. And he's partially, they went to court over it, and they basically said that he wasn't responsible for this event, but a lot of people still believe he was because of how rare the storm was. But there was a 40-day rainstorm in California that basically flooded the whole all of California, from Southern California all the way up to Sacramento. They had, and even beyond Sacramento, they had exceptional floods. Sacramento was under 10 feet of water. Parts of like San Diego and Los Angeles were under like 5 feet of water. So they have deemed that he wasn't responsible for it because they're basically trying to sue him. And they said that it was an act of God rather than him doing it. But a lot of people do think it's a coincidence that he just happened to release his mixture into the sky, and then suddenly we had 40 days of rain the day after that he released that, or like the week after he released those chemicals. So yeah, he was not held responsible, but again, a lot of people think that he actually did. Luckily, I wasn't following the chat at the moment, so I didn't actually see what that person said in regard to the troll. Let's see.
I wouldn't worry about the chat. Don't worry about the chat. I got the chat covered. I got it covered, all right? You good.
I know. And I mean, I'm used to it at this point. I've been a tour guide. Another funny tangent. I used to work in an aquarium in Santa Cruz, and part of my job was to give tours of the outside of the facility. And they had a blue whale skeleton out there, and you can see on the skeleton the vestigial hip bones, which are basically when they used to be land animals. They had legs, they went in the water, and gradually over time lost their legs, but they still have the hip bones left over, like little tiny things of where their legs used to be. And when I was giving the tour, I pointed those out because that's like part of my spiel. And somebody came up to me and they're like, "Oh, that's not possible," because I was saying like how old the skeleton or the whales were, and they're like, "That's not possible because the Earth is only 6,000 years old." And I was like, right, forgot about that. My bad. I just did not know how to respond to that. But yeah, I'm used to it. Being in environmental science, you kind of have to accept that not everyone's going to believe you. People are going to get bothered by what you're saying. Because the sad thing is especially with climate change, fixing climate change isn't really equivalent to fixing ozone, even though ozone is a good example of how we can change things. They're not the same thing, because ozone involves a lot more like want to have rather than need to have types of products. It affected like aerosol containers, so hairspray, deodorant containers, cleaning supplies, whatnot. But and then obviously like refrigerants and like Freon gas, I think that was one of them. Those types of things can be replaced through other means. But the sad thing with greenhouse gases, literally everything we rely on release greenhouse gases. Beef is one of the most commonly eaten meats across the world. And they release a tremendous amount of carbon dioxide and methane. A lot of our farming practices release carbon dioxide and methane. A lot of obviously our cars, our machines, everything that runs our electric grid, everything that runs our water systems. Like, most people don't know that our water systems rely on electricity too. All of the distribution plants and the sanitation facilities, the what do you call it? The cleaning the water and whatever before they send it off to us. Like, all of that type of stuff is reliant on greenhouse gas producing stuff. All of our products, everything that we use, unless it's handmade by somebody that knits your sweater for you. And I mean, even the yarn is probably at everything we wear, everything we use, everything we eat at some point had been produced by something that produces greenhouse gases. And so that's part of the reason why the greenhouse gas issue is such a difficult thing to solve, because it's literally at every single stage of in our lives. We rely on it very, very heavily, and we don't really have very reliable methods to replace them. Even the stuff that are green per se, such as windmills, such as electric cars and battery operated stuff, they still require greenhouse gases to be produced, to be made, to be fueled. Because obviously, yeah, you have electric cars, but how do you refuel them? You plug them in, and those grids are fueled by greenhouse gases. So it's always sad to think about how much of a mountain it's going to be to climb. And that's why I always say I don't really think we're going to get to a point that we actually fix it unless we really start to directly head on hit the impacts. And I think we're kind of at that point, but we're at the very beginning stages. With ozone, it was easy to just kind of ban the specific chemicals altogether. But with greenhouse gases, you can't really just ban carbon dioxide, because that is the main problem. And I mean, how are you going to ban something that is produced by almost everything that we do? It would require a immediate replacement of everything that we rely on. And even things that you wouldn't even think of release carbon dioxide and methane. Like, even concrete releases it. Open land releases it. Wetlands release it. Forests release it, burning forests. And at this point too, even the ocean is releasing it, because we've filled it with it has absorbed more than it can hold of carbon dioxide. And so it's now becoming a net emitter rather than a net absorber. And those are only, carbon dioxide and methane aren't even the only greenhouse gases that are a problem. They're just the most well-known ones. Nitrous oxide and fluorinated gases like hydrofluorocarbons, perfluorocarbons, sulfur hexafluoride, nitrogen trifluoride. Those are also emitted from household, commercial applications, industrial processes. And those also significantly increase global warming and heat trapping. So it's hard to talk about as somebody that wants change so badly, but I also know how unrealistic it can be. And I think that's part of why people feel so overwhelmed by it and get so angry, because the solutions aren't pretty. like a lot, I've heard so many people like, oh, you want to go back to the dark ages? And it's hard because you're basically saying like, we need to give up everything that has made our lives possible. Like some of the greatest inventions that have allowed humans to become as successful, I wouldn't even widespread, I wouldn't really call it successful per se. In a biological sense, yes, but I don't think this is a successful existence, as we are basically wiping out the existence of everything else. But our impact is, or our existence in this capacity, reaching almost 9 billion people, has only been possible because of the inventions that we have come up with because of gas and oil. It's no coincidence that the invention of engines and motors and all that stuff also happened at the same time that the population increased. Our access to heaters and air conditioners allow us to go to areas and withstand temperatures that would have killed us before. Our access to the medical technologies that we have are obviously responsible for saving billions of lives. When in the past, you like in the 1900s, you could literally die from a paper cut. And no exaggeration. Today, like some cancers have a 99% survival rate. Some things that like we've seen a massive decrease in deadly diseases. And we have cars, we have trains, we have airplanes, we have all sorts of comfort items that make life easier. Refrigerators have made a huge difference in our quality of life. Our access to freezers have also had a massive impact on our lives. Like we don't really think about the impact of electricity in our lives because we've been so, especially if you're born in like 80s, 90s, or even like a bit into the, like even in like the 50s, 60s, when you started getting your microwaves, everyone was able to start affording fridges and stuff like that. Like it increased the quality of life substantially. It's no surprise that they're used as indicators of well-being. And because we're so used to having all this stuff now, we can't possibly fathom a world without it. Like I was just thinking about this earlier myself. I was watching information about the Carrington event, which was in 1859, a massive CME. That's the name I was trying to remember earlier. A coronal mass ejection. That's when the sun releases a super, super burst of radiative energy at us. And in 1859, we had a massive, massive solar flare, CME. CMEs are different than solar flares. Solar flares are much smaller and they're more like plasma, whereas CMEs is like it ejects like the sun at you. Obviously not the whole sun. That would be, we wouldn't be here anymore. But in 1859, we had a major, major CME, and it directly hit the Earth. And it was the right polarity. It has to be the right one. Otherwise, it'll just pass unnoticed. And it was so severe that aurora borealises, and there's the southern version, which I'm aurora australis or something like that. It was seen at the equator. Like they literally were seeing the aurora borealis in Florida and Cuba and South America, which is wildly rare. Like this does not happen very often. Most of the time you can see it in like Canada and Russia, Norway, Sweden, stuff like that. But it, like when CMEs hit the Earth, it's electrical, and it messes with the electronics. And so that, like the telegraphs that they had, they would turn off the machines because they would start malfunctioning and stuff like that. But because of all the electricity and energy in the air, they were literally working without being on. Like they were still turned on and working as if they were turned on, but they weren't. They even had, like, if you put your finger near like electrical items, like you'd have little static lightning coming off your fingers or coming at you from the electrical devices. And there were all sorts of other impacts. It messed with like the little electricity that we did have. It blew out transformers, and you could see it like traveling along the lines. Anything metal was like producing electricity. Back in the, was it Vietnam War? So that was the 70s. They had a CME, not as bad as the Carrington event, but it was large enough that it actually was detonating bombs and mines that were under the ground unintentionally. And if we had one today, chaos, mass chaos. It would be something from a Hollywood movie, because all of our systems rely on electricity now. And just imagine what would happen if all of the electrical grids, or half of the electrical grids in the entire world, broke all at once. Like, that would take at least a decade to repair all of that. Like, we would be in a very, very different era. And I was thinking about that myself. Like, with everything that I know, and as wishfully as I could prep for some of these things, and as much as I already know I'd be completely at a loss of what to do if I suddenly lost all my access to everything. We had a power outage for like 15-20 minutes a couple months ago, or like a month ago, and I remember being like, what do I do with myself? So we are very heavily reliant on these types of technologies, and if without it, we wouldn't be able to function. Most people would not understand how they could possibly function without these things, which is crazy because we've only had a lot of this stuff for like 70 years, really. Like, yeah, we had the light bulb and stuff like that, but we haven't been dependent on electricity for every single thing in our life. Communication, for refrigeration, for cooking our food, for running our, like, getting ourselves from point A to point B, for like teaching our children, for understanding the world around us. It would be absolute chaos. And it's a window into what it would be like if we had to suddenly shift our entire system to a non-carbonized format, because as I said, everything is going to produce carbon. Everything is reliant on the systems that produce carbon, and we wouldn't do too well. But I do like to bring up I do like to talk about the ozone issue, because, as I said, we need positive examples right now of how we can change. We need to motivate ourselves in a way that can bring us closer to a goal. Because one of the things that I learned from my master's degree research, it's that a lot of people tune out the problem because they don't feel like anything can be done. They don't think that there's anything that we can do. And I've seen a lot of, I wouldn't call them climate deniers, because they don't exactly deny that climate change is happening, but they deny the need to do anything about it. And I hear that from people where they're like, well, we already ruined the planet anyways, so what's the point? It's a very defeatist kind of attitude. And I've noticed it in a lot of younger generations, but I do also see it in some older generations where they just like, what else are we supposed to do? And that isn't the type of attitude that you want to have when you're facing that type of issue. Like, can you imagine if people responded to like hurricanes or tornadoes like that, where you're like, well, the tornado's already on its way, so there's not much you can do about it. Can't stop it. So I'm just going to sit in my house and watch it happen. So, and the sad thing is, because of how severe the impacts are and how impending the dangers are of what's coming, and with how terrified scientists are, a lot of the news coming out about climate change is negative. I think that's why a substantial amount of the population writes off the discussions and doesn't want to hear anything about it, because not only do they feel like it's a fruitless exploration, but also if even the scientists are saying like, oh, we're all going to die, there's nothing we can do, like we need to rapidly get rid of every single thing that brings us joy and every single thing that we rely on, a lot of people are going to be like, all right, doomsdayer. Like, their scientists have become the equivalent of those people that stand on the street corner with the sign, the end is near, we're all gonna die. And we can't really have that mentality when we're trying to approach a widespread worldwide problem. We need to have some elements of positivity in this. And I mean, I'm even guilty of that myself. I struggle sometimes with being positive about climate change because I do see the impacts that are coming. I do see a lot of the research that comes out, like evidence of the sea level rising, evidence of ecosystems that are really important to us collapsing, examples of the damages that we're already doing to ourselves and our systems. But again, we can't lose that sense of hope because, I mean, even research has shown this in psychology that people die when they give up. Even in, like, one of my favorite psychologists, Gabor Mate, he studies the mind-body effects and how the way you think affects your own health and the way that you respond to traumas, and your ability to recover from traumas, and then also its relationship to like diseases. And he survived the Holocaust. Both of his parents were killed, but he ended up surviving. And he found that if people chose to give up, they died. They often just like went to sleep and never woke up, or would have illnesses and would just not recover from them. And we shouldn't have that attitude when it comes to this. Like, I think it's really unfortunate that we have almost an entire generation of kids that think that the world is already over and that they might as well just hang up their coats and enjoy what they can before we all die, because that's not really the mentality we want to have. Not only because we're doing ourselves a disservice, but we're doing all the future generations a disservice. If we don't even make an effort to improve our own lives and improve the system that we're a part of today, imagine what our kids' kids, and their future children are going to have to deal with. We really don't want to turn this Earth into Venus. Venus is, or is it Venus or Mercury? Venus, I think. Is it? I always mix the two up. Yeah, Venus is basically, if you ever want to see what Earth would be like with runaway global warming, which is really rapid increase in carbon dioxide, look at Venus. That would be our future. It's the same size as the Earth. Granted, it is closer to the sun, but it has a very, very thick atmosphere in comparison to ours, and it is wildly, wildly hotter. Its average temperature on the surface of the planet is 86 to 158 degrees Fahrenheit. They also have extreme winds of 224 miles an hour. And yeah, not something not something that we would want to live on, and we would not be able to live on. Not to mention, thicker our atmosphere is less sunlight, particularly the types that they have. So yeah, it's really important to kind of keep that perspective and not look at it from like, well, me today. Look at it more from all of us in the future, because we don't want to give up on our planet because we have one. Where else are we going to go? I hate to break it to you, but we're not going to be living on Mars anytime soon. Maybe if we got forced to live there, we maybe potentially could maybe live there. I doubt it. I really doubt the science behind it, but we're not at the point where we can live on any other planets. And so we have to start thinking about how we can protect this one. And looking to the ozone problem is a good way to start, because it can be an example for the type of legislative work that needs to be done, and a way to motivate people to make these changes. Because once people, normal, regular people, not just like scientists, found out about it, there were marches in the street. There were people willingly protesting to bring attention to these issues. And we are very much part of the solution. A lot of people also kind of like, oh, well, I'm not a scientist. I can't do anything. But we together as a society can do a lot. We have just been kind of trained into complacency, that it's not worth it to try and make a change. But I think we're getting to the point where we now realize that we are capable of making widespread changes. And I feel, at least from what I've seen in the news and from people online and how people talk about it, I do feel like we're at a tipping point where people will start to stand up and try and make a difference. But again, it's good to keep the wins in mind. That way we're able to continue motivating ourselves to actually make a change, because having that demotivating, everything's over type mentality is not going to help us.
Man, oh man, oh man. Hey, look, I'm going to say this. First of all, a phenomenal job. Secondly, salutes to Chef, to Mark. I appreciate you for tapping in. Let me move this over. All right, let's try this. All right, there we go. We don't care enough about the environment. I just keep saying that until the end of time. We just don't care enough about it. We will eventually, when you ain't got no other choice. It's no different than eating unhealthy, and then the doctor tell you gotta pop 20 pills because your blood pressure is way too high, and now you can't eat that chicken, and you can't eat this, and you can't eat that. I want to say thank you to everybody who pulled up to support the stream. This was very educational. This is very informative, and I honestly hope that it does reach the audience that it should reach. Everything is not about drama. Our environment is important. The things that we do to it is important, and we need to acknowledge it and show more appreciation for things that we have, right? I think outside of that phenomenal show, you killed it. I knew you would. I believe in you. I'm always going to be one of your biggest supporters on this side, even if I'm behind the scenes. I was cutting it up with Chef in the comment section, but yeah, it's all good over here, man. Hold up. Let me see something.
Oh my
Whoa.
God.
Oh, salutes, bro. Salutes. I don't throw it on all the time, but when I do, respect.
I also have to touch on that comment too. That is definitely another big thing, is that when scientists they talk at people, and so that's why I enjoy doing this and why I try to reach people where they're at, and I try and I digest all this information so I can give it back to people in a way that connects, because I think that's a big issue with the science community right now is they don't know how to talk to people. They have all this information, but they don't have people skills. And so, as you said, they end up sounding shit crazy because they're just yelling at you you're the reason the Arctic is melting. You're the reason why everything's flooding. We're all going to die. We're all going to be on their forefeet. And everyone's just okay, cool, thanks. So I always like to use metaphor and connect with people and find ways to make it real, but in a way that's actually understandable to the average person. That's also why I chose to start writing poetry about it, because I think when you reach people from a more human and emotional perspective, it works better than when you try and just hit them over the head with information. Again, that was something that I found in my research, is that people responded better to human connection over impacts. When you just talk facts at people, they tune it out. They don't want to listen. But if you directly connect it to something that they really care about, they are more willing to listen, and they're more willing to take that information and continue applying it to their lives. If I was just to tell somebody we have this much carbon in the atmosphere, and in 20 years we're going to have this much energy in the atmosphere, people are going to walk away and be oh yeah, numbers. But if you tell somebody the more we increase carbon dioxide in our atmosphere, it'll actually make us more sick, because the carbon dioxide is considered a pollutant, and in the future we're going to be more likely to get illnesses. It can cause brain dysfunction, because if you have too much carbon dioxide, it'll impact your speech and your ability to cognitively understand things around you, and it kind of makes you think slower. People are going to are going to take that home and be oh man, I want that to affect how I'm thinking and how I'm behaving and stuff like that. And it's you have to make things relatable for people to get it. So I always appreciate having everyone on here supporting, being in the chat, and contributing to this, because it does make me feel better. When I was in high school, college, I used to be I was in despair. I felt I wanted to give up. I felt I should just ignore it. And I had that kind of mindset of, well, we're all effed anyways, so what's the point? But seeing all the support in the community, seeing people start rallying around these issues is incredibly motivating for somebody that knows all this information, because again, it felt so helpless before, but knowing that people are still interested and still want to make the world a better place, it makes it easier to start reaching out again and talking about it, because I know that it's not on deaf ears like I once thought it was. So I always appreciate the conversations in the chat and the interactions with people and hearing how others respond. Plus, gives me a good idea of how to connect with people more by seeing how people resonate.
Much love. Thank you.
I do have a poem too I can end with, so it's more positive again.
All right. I'm gonna let you close it out. Give you your solo.
So I thought this one would be a good poem to end with. I wrote it about the It's a famous image of the first time we ever photographed Earth from space, from the moon. And it was a very pivotal moment because not only was it the first time we were like in space seeing the Earth from there, but it basically started the first global environmental movement. And it does also kind of coincide with the time period of the ozone issues. It was in 1970. It triggered the creation of Earth Day. So I named this one Earthrise, which was the name of that photograph. And it's about that, basically. For a moment in time, mankind was cemented, mesmerized, transfixed, anxiously to the two. This would be an experience all would cling to, during a time when there was no faith, no hope. Heroes were stolen when we needed them most, as hostile battles raged in fields and on streets, taking the lives of the mindless and the innocent. Politicians spewed media myths and blistering rain as chemical warfare was transferred into homes, despite civilians and servicemen marching for peace. But in 68, on Christmas Eve, we were confronted with our fragility, our insignificance, our impermanence, as we finally touched the sky. We sent out our best men to circle round Celine. Unlike our own home, this empty satellite friend had nothing to offer besides data and dust. The atmosphere, the temperatures, no forest of trees, just peaks and valleys pocked with billions of rocks, nonetheless shining with illustrious substance, glowing with promise, with help from the sun. And from this meager horizon, a planetary reveal, embraced within the black translucence of space, our jade and cobalt marble had risen with grace. Through the round portal of human endeavor, dressed in whipping white storms and blue seas, was our world, our home captured within a photograph, a time capsule, a moment that for a little while united us all.
And with that being said, you guys enjoy the rest of your night. Appreciate you for hanging out with us. We'll be back tomorrow, Lord willing.
Thank you for being here.
Drive safe. Be careful on the road. And we'll see you later. Oh, do me a solid before y'all go, if you don't mind. Peace.
By examining his own attitude towards the possibilities of peace, towards the Soviet Union, towards the course of the Cold War.
Art muscle. It was a way of making me feel that they were a part of me.
You see it on the bridge. Wait, how they get it? If the government had to change the screw in the bridge, they had to shut it down. They got state troopers out there. They got lanes closed. They got their strange